Hello, welcome back. I am Darcy Darkness, and this is Confessions from the Darkside. How are you all in this wonderful community? And today I present The Florida Man in Woodsboro, the story of the Gainesville Ripper. Now, I'm going to put my disclaimer in here first, and then we're going to discuss what we're actually covering today and why this is actually a wee bit more serious than what we usually do. We are full of so much adult content that some of you may think it is unnecessary, some of you may think that it isn't needed. If you are one of those people, then thanks for checking us out, but I will say this only once. If you can't stand the heat, then get the fuck out of my kitchen. Now, for everyone else who likes what we have here, then regular scheduled programming will continue. Shall we get started? Are we ready? The title of this podcast is called The Florida Man in Woodsboro. Why have I went for that title, you ask? Well, the Gainesville Ripper is actually what the original Scream movie that Kevin Williamson wrote his screenplay. So Scream is actually based around a real murder, a real case. And it would have been big in the States, but again, in the 90s, we wouldn't have really heard about much about it. We'd probably have heard about the killings, but we probably wouldn't have got as much detail as what you would have got, obviously, over in the States because it happened in Florida. Were you aware that Scream is actually based on a real life tragedy and not just a creation by Kevin Williamson and brought to life by Wes Fkn Craven? If no, then sit back and let's take that in. A lot of movies, shows, and things that we read are based on real life events and experiences. Even the most gruesome have been linked to crimes that have led to imaginations running wild and creating some of the best projects to the big screen. So I don't know about you, but I love true crime and I love finding out new cases, whether they are old or new, old or resolved, new and improved. I'll link a few channels that I watch and the ones that I really like to watch, including the Casual Criminals, which is Simon Whistler, and he has plenty of channels, and he's brilliant. Bailey Sarian, who does makeup mystery makeup mystery Mondays, and she does a lot of dark history and lots of other things. And there's also a girl from the UK that I do, a young woman who her name is Daniel Kirsty, and she covers a lot of UK based ones, which does do a lot of American ones. And again, I could be here all day talking about, and also we've got Grizzly True Crime as well. So, Scream came out in 1996, but the actual case that brought this movie to light actually happened in 1990 by a man named Danny Rolling. Scream 2 is closer to the real story as it was college students and not high school students that he took out in Gainesville, Florida. And guess what? Scream's title was before they settled for Scream was Scary Movie. Yes, not the parody, but it was going to be called Scary Movie. Aren't we glad they changed it? So this podcast, I am trying to show you the similarities of the actual story and case to the adaptations that happened in the movie and how Kevin Williamson and Wes fucking Craven actually lined up as much of the original origin of this horrific tragedy that happened in Gainesville, Florida in 1990. And the stuff that they added to make it more of a gore fest, even though they did use a lot, I've noticed, when you actually match up the killer from the original crime to the killers they used in the first two movies, especially. So I'm going to kind of do it that way. And this is the first one of us, probably a series of many that we're going to dig deep into the original cases that have ended up being used in horror movies, basically. So before the killings, Gainesville was voted the 13th best place to live. Then a short time later, once the crimes of Danny Rawlings happened, they were brought to light. It became known as Grizzly Gainesville. So why did Danny Rawlings go on a rampage and kill 5 people? There are many different reasons. One was because he wanted to become a celebrity like Ted Bundy, who again, from Florida. Was Ted Bundy a celebrity though? He was well known, convicted serial killer and rapist, but I wouldn't say a celebrity. Maybe he thought he was, but 2, they blame his upbringing, the abuse he was subjected to, and again, we are all humans and we all come from different walks of life with different experiences, different start outs, but that doesn't give us a free pass to take anyone's life or do anything to anyone just because we didn't have the best upbringing doesn't give that as an excuse for us to act like that and this is what annoys me, the romanticism and making you feel sorry for them. They're wanting you to give them a free pass for taking 5 people's life. If they had such a bad upbringing, then maybe they should have done something to change their future rather than destroy more families just because of their past. The way he killed his victims was planned. It wasn't that he just decided to display them as he did after killing them. He was showing that he was capable, what he was capable of, and how he had the power. 5 students at the start of a new semester. So excitement and happiness, and then this tragic demise of these students that were found brutally murdered and mutilated at their university campus in Florida while they slept. This actually happened. The first 2 murders were actually happened to new freshmen, I believe they're called, and they were at one university staying in an apartment together. They were roommates, and then it was another 2 who lived together. So the way he killed his victims was planned. 5 students in the start of a new semester, so excitement, happiness, and then this tragic demise of these students that were found brutally murdered and mutilated at their university campus in Florida while they slept. So the first 2 murders were actually at the same university and in an apartment where they were roommates. And it was because their parents of one of the girls couldn't get hold of their daughter from Friday, and they thought it was very unusual, and that's why they sent someone to look when they hadn't heard. The one of the victims was actually not a freshman. She was actually a college student from the town, and then there was another 2 college students who were older. They were in their 20s, and they again lived in the same house, and they were childhood friends. So again, they were all what looked like in safe places, in their own houses, in their own surroundings, basically, when these murders happened. When this happened, hundreds of students fled back home, unsure if they would be next. This is similar to what happened in Idaho in 2022, where students were killed at their residence, the college town, while people were on high alert of the unknowing and not sure if the killer would strike again. With the high alert and paranoia, I'm not surprised students didn't feel safe, and neither did the people in town or their parents actually of the children or the young adults who were actually at university. It wouldn't be a nice experience. I can't even imagine what that would feel like. The police thought they had their man, as they did, and they went after this other gentleman who had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. He wasn't an innocent guy, but he also wasn't a murderer either. So they weren't looking for anybody else, as they thought this was the guy. Now, this is what annoys me about the whole actual physical proof and evidence, and how can they have the guy? Shoddy police work, yes. Just because the guy wasn't a good guy doesn't mean that him and his family deserve to be thrown to the wolves. So Rollins was safe at this point, as they were trying to pin the crimes on this guy. His name is Edward Humphrey. So because of his previous behaviours and witnesses to the instance, the police found after 1 week this was the guy. They had zero evidence, but manipulated the system to build a case around him. Yes, that's right, around him, and find the evidence that would place him at the residence of the students, or if he was seen, or if anyone noticed a man of his description lurking around. They kept him under arrest and in jail, innocent until proven guilty. Whether he was guilty of the crimes of his past, that's something different. This was new and not just a misdemeanor. This was murder. They built a case around Edward. They didn't have evidence. They had no DNA evidence. They had no place of putting him basically there, but they did it anyway because he had a rap sheet as long as his arm basically, so they didn't give a fuck. And again, in these sort of situations, they talked about it in Idaho as well, the first couple of days of not finding the proper evidence or getting proper leads, then you start getting a smaller window. So you've got to basically be quick, and you've got, once you find an actual significant strong lead, then you've got to go with it. But they didn't have that, so being hounded probably by everybody to find this murder. Only had one guy. As I said, they didn't have the right guy, so they wasted time right at the very fucking start, and when they could have prevented more people from being killed. But hey, it's police. They all don't always do their job. How did they figure out that Mr. Humphreys wasn't the killer and they had the wrong man? Well, they arrested said suspect under a different charge of armed robbery in Alcala, Florida, after he fled the town where he took 5 people's lives. Even though at this point they hadn't tied these strings together, putting Rollins at the scene of the crime, it didn't take long for them to realise they had the wrong man in custody. But the Humphreys family were long away from clearing their family's name, as he was guilty till they proved it otherwise, which is not how the judicial system works, people. And this is the perverse behaviour that happens in every country. If you don't look right, then you're obviously guilty by association, which is not always the case. During the trial for his crimes, his mother and his previous girlfriend backed up the abuse claims that his mother felt trapped in leaving her abusive husband and continued to stay. And with that, she allowed her husband to abuse her son. And again, I am a parent and I would rather take it than have my child subjected to this, making me think his mother wasn't just weak for herself, but she didn't have the ability to protect and keep her child safe. I get some people feel like they can never leave and it still goes on today. If this is going on and you are aware of this, please just tread carefully and be there when they need you the most, because sometimes things happen quickly and there's only one chance to take to leave and to flee. Protecting your family, your children is your job, and your child has become a monster not only by the crimes of their father, but also you, the mother, for staying and subjecting them to things they should never have had to accept. During the trial, people felt sorry for him as a child and how these behaviours and abuses caused him to do what he did, and again using past trauma to get sympathy for the actions he did to make him look human when he took 5 innocent people's lives when they were just starting out their adulthood at college, preparing to create their new chapters. I'm sorry. I couldn't feel sorry for someone who has been abused growing up. He has no empathy for others. He didn't seem to care about these people he killed when he was committing the crime, and then desecrating their bodies by displaying their mutilated bodies again. And Scream, they did this with the killings of all the victims from the start. Casey hanging from the tree, her boyfriend disemboweled at the pool, to Tatum's infamous doggy door death. Henry Winkler, the principal at Woodsboro High School. Kevin Williamson made the original serial killers sound well more on a rampage, and they only killed 4 people in the original Scream movie, including Sydney's mother, Maureen, which happened previously to the high school murders. So we're close to the origins with the display of the victims here and how they try and make it like kind of mental health, like they're kind of broke type thing. Rollins took out these 5 poor souls as an adult, not a child. And for them to play in his childhood and formative years to make it okay for him to take innocent people's lives still annoys me. I know lawyers have to give everyone counsel, but at what cost of him getting away with killing 5 people and being let out for him to do it again? What about the families that lost their children for an unknown reason, that they were in the wrong place at the wrong time when they were in their beds at college? If his mother and exes thought he was so unstable, I didn't understand why they didn't report him and have him sectioned if they knew he had some sort of affliction that he wanted to kill, he wanted to murder innocent strangers. Would that not make them just as to blame as Rollins themselves, that they knew something was not right and yet they stood back and allowed it to happen? This could have been prevented, yet we have had Scream. Which case would Kevin Williamson have used if this was prevented? In 1994, 12 jurors and 1 judge had to make the decision of should this previous abuse in his past be used as a reason for how they conducted the trial to be more understanding to the abuse he was subjected to, meaning that his trial would be more lenient towards situation or have the full brunt of the law. You know how I feel about it. If you can't do the time, then don't do the crime. A call to the police department for a complaint about loud music came through again. This again happened in the Idaho case recently in 2022, a few times before the murders had happened. Also, kids being at college, kids, it happens. They weren't that bothered about it as it was the first week into a new semester, where most kids would be letting loose and partying for the new year and also new start, etc. It's called having fun and being young. The janitor, which again was the guy who called the police, who actually who basically, I think it was when the parents had called and said they couldn't get a hold of their daughter, which was really not like her, out of her character, that they actually got a janitor type guy to deal with it, and he called the police and they were unsure about how to go about it. So when the offer showed up, they entered the property, and now just before they actually opened the door, they noticed like a few things. It was just out of place. The officer was distressed apparently over kids not answering or not answering the door as it happens. They usually show up eventually apparently because it's the first week of school. But they failed to realise the distress they cause in their parents, as it's a big bad world out there and they're not there to protect them when they flee the nest for college. So again, it'd be like any other parent not noticing something different and having to actually, check up on them. Christina's mother hadn't heard from her, and a roommate, and they both hadn't been heard of. The car was in the drive, so they knew they were in. When they tried to open the apartment door with the master key, it was dead-bolted from the inside. They broke the window beside the door, and when they did this strong odour came out. Now, that's never good if there is a strong odour emanating from a room or a house. There's usually foul play there. So once they entered the apartment, a woman in the bed, and she was posed in, well, shock and disgust. Anyone who would come a knocking, and then another young woman had been savagely stabbed. The name of the movie that is within the Scream universe, when they made the movie about Sydney's past, and again was posed in a way to cause terror, and that was actually called Stab. So again, it has some similarities because that's what kind of happened in the movie within a movie, which was actually started in Scream 2, not Scream the original movie. The officer came out and the parents saw from his face that something was wrong, of course. You can't even prepare an officer for actually walking into that either. He advised the parents to stay put. He called into homicide and asked for the crisis centre to come and help with the news. And the parents, as I cannot imagine what it must have felt like, and how would you deliver that news or bring this to attention to the parents that their child has been murdered? By the time the police and everybody had shown up to the scene, the media were there and the vultures. They had at it. They were there, figured out that two young women were freshmen and weren't known by many people, as they were from two different parts of Florida, and they were new at being at college. So the media response is similar to Scream. Again, Gail Weathers, who's played by Courtney Cox, she was very intrusive towards Sydney because she covered Sydney's mother's murder and the trial. So they did keep that as truthful as they could, because we know how bad the paparazzi and press can actually be in any situation. So a neighbour said they heard someone shouting and loud music. The song playing was George Michael's Faith, and a loud banging noise. The neighbour thought they were hanging pictures. Really, a banging that was so loud, and it was loud enough to be heard over music. What the fuck were they hanging? The other roommate came back and had no idea what was going on, and when she was informed that they had been killed in their apartment, she had a thought that any of us would have. That could have been me. One of the young women had been mutilated more than the other. The police were taking fingerprints and taking statements at this point, and they had just decided that Humphreys was the killer, or they were just collecting evidence and not trying to find someone without proof. Officers were called to. There was an officer, called to another part of the town where a member of the police department's records staff was living, and she also was a student. She worked back shift and she never actually, or night shift, I think, and it was like she didn't show up for work, and it was very uncommon. It was not like her nature not to show up without actually phoning and, saying that she was going to be late, or maybe she was sick or whatever. So the officer that went to the college and found the two young girls at the University of Florida, his partner went to the house of the police records department worker, Krista, and she noticed again a few different things. She came to the apartment and she got the manager to come of the apartment complex to let her in, and they noticed that the gate was damaged and the fence was down, which is like a chain link fence was down. Again, that is a big thing of, did someone do that to get in, or did that get damaged on their way out? And again, it could possibly be both. When they went around the building to check for any more damage, they tried the back door. It was one of those kind of glass sliding doors, and it was locked from the inside, again, similar to the freshman's apartment. Everything was locked from the inside. They noticed that the blinds weren't all the way drawn to the bottom, so the officer went down on her knees and she actually checked to see if they could see underneath. And when she peered under with her flashlight to check out, they seemed to look like a naked body that had been displayed at the edge of the bed and a pool of blood beside them. When they were looking and checking, they realised the body had no head, and they had to make a call again. Scream itself had this where Casey's mother can hear her daughter's last breath on the phone when she's being dragged by Ghostface, basically, to her last sort of... Oh, before they actually hang her up on the tree, that's the first thing you see when you actually go up to Casey Becker's house. Her parents see her hanging there on display, and that's what, again, kind of matches up with him displaying the bodies. Ghostface does it as well, and it's the opening for the movie. The popular girl, and again, popular actress, doesn't last very long in the movie, and she is basically, that's where it starts. It's very memorable, very iconic, and again, you can think, oh my goodness, instead of doing a headless body, they've decided to do this instead, maybe because they maybe not been able to get away with it, or maybe they didn't want to actually properly mirror the real crime for the respect to the families and the actual victim herself. Water was heard running, like still running, and they thought the killer was still on the property, so they set up to go check and take in the suspect, they thought was still there, but had to wait for backup for 30 minutes. For a murder, really wasting time. They slowly entered the property, making sure not to damage the crime scene, but yet they waited 30 fucking minutes. But hey, they started in the bathroom as they could hear the shower dripping. Is it me, or is this shouting afterwards like he is unclean, that he must remove the evidence, or is it a ritualistic sort of trait of being bad and having to bathe his sins away? The fact that Faith by George Michael was playing as well. And the first murder, there's a lot of weird traits about some of the things that he did that we find out later on. When they went through the property, the horrific scenes of blood spatter, even the young woman's head full on display on a bookshelf. Nothing could ever remove that image, that's for sure. The trauma of the officers that have to go through these types of things, I doubt they would ever be the same again. After what they witnessed on the bed of the headless body, they left the property as they knew the killer was in fact gone and had fled the scene of the crime. When the officers who were at both crime scenes, they realised after the bodies of the women were removed from the homes that they were connected. From the stage bodies to the mutilation, this was the same killer, as the conditions in which the girls were found, the way they were found, the brutality of the scene, same weapon was used. It was between a 46-inch blade. There were far too many similarities in a short space of time and in the same place. It's not a coincidence these crimes were linked. With the scream knife, they used a buck 120, which is 18.9 inches, which is 7.5 inches. So the knife that was used in these crimes was different, which was a 46-inch blade. Again, when you look at the knives back to back, like side by side, there are some similarities. One is the one that was used in the models is actually completely a black blade, and the one that's used in Scream is not. And they stopped making the buck 120 apparently as well. So I'm not sure if it's because people just kept buying them because of Scream, but who knows. Also, adhesive tape, like a gaffer tape, I think, was used as a restraint and had been removed from the scene. Body parts were missing from the crime scenes as well. Again, we don't know what he did with them. They didn't actually discuss that when I actually looked through a lot of the evidence online, where he would take body parts as a souvenir. Who the fuck knows? Or maybe to fuck with him. Who, I have no idea what that guy was thinking. I don't even think he knew what he was thinking after he'd done it, to be honest. The police involved at the scenes were hounded by the press, which again, in the movie, Gail Weathers, again played by Courtney Cox, she ended up being right hooked by Sydney as she was hounding her about her mother's murder and the wrongful conviction of an innocent man. Are you seeing a pattern here? And this happens in real life. And in the story and in this investigation, the police adding 2 plus 2 and coming up with 5, so they didn't look like they would suck at solving a case. They kept an innocent man in this case in jail to work a case around him and get evidence. They kept him in jail and they made the evidence around him. It wasn't evidence that linked him or implicated him to the crime. It was things that they could pin on him to say he was the killer without actually having DNA evidence, which again is not how you solve a murder, and it's again not the way you would catch the real killer, put it that way. So with the media playing a big role in this murder, that's again like that in Scream. Cotton Weary went to jail because Sydney's testimony put him away because she thought she'd seen him leaving. So her testimony put an innocent man away for killing her mum. And it was actually her boyfriend, Billy Loomis, who killed her mother. I think the parents of the victims would rather the right person was arrested and charged so that no other family would have to go through this, and also wasting fucking time as well. And the time that they wasted setting up this guy, they could have actually been doing real police work and actually trying to find a killer who actually did it in the first place, and maybe not having to put the families through undue weight of actually putting the guy behind bars who actually committed the crime in the first place. Information to the press was actually monitored as people were using their own imaginations, letting them run wild by filling in the plot holes to the story that they were publishing. Not much has changed from the movie then. The victims he chose were said to not know their attacker. And this is what made college students fearful and vulnerable. With all the embellishments in the news, this wouldn't have helped that this is what was covered in the movie too, including Gail's publishing a book. She published a book about Cottonway and being innocent and being behind bars and being given the death penalty, and how you shouldn't have the death penalty because he's innocent. And she basically used the deaths that were happening in Woodsboro at that instance to actually push and plug the sales of her new book, kind of thing. And again, we touched on this again because Kevin Williamson again has taken parts of what happened after the case and put them into the movie too, and that's what I really, really like about the fact that it's been researched enough to actually say, yeah, that's the Gainesville, Florida murder case. Everyone felt like a target as it happened in two different colleges. Well, it happened from, it wasn't just the University of Florida, it was Santa Fe as well, I think one of the victims was actually at. It wasn't the University of Florida, so it was like different colleges, so no one was safe. With all the task force members to help calm the situation and handle this better than local law enforcement had failed to deliver in this, as they weren't used to this sort of tragedy. Again, happened in Idaho as well. Small places aren't actually cut out for this, to this magnitude anyway. I'm not surprised they brought in outside experts to try and catch the killer again. This happened in other murders. Well, they stopped putting news and updates out there as it was causing hysteria and turning the investigation into a circus. When they were trying to hunt down a killer, small towns like this cannot handle this type of thing. It's not expected. Woodsboro was a small town. Everyone knows everyone, etc. Does that sound familiar? Yes, it does. Young women became super aware of strange men and really went out alone. Again, Sydney had the police tail and was never left alone. Dewey, Tatum's brother, said she was never to be left alone. Someone had to be with her. So again, not paranoia, as she could have been the next victim, as the killer had called her. August 28th, two more bodies were found. But this wasn't just female victims. It was also a 23-year-old male. So no one is safe, it seemed. Two childhood friends who shared an apartment together. Again, they were in college, but I think they were like almost at the tail end of college, the way they were actually describing it. Unable to get in contact with Manny, who was the male who was killed, Manuela, and a friend went to check. They got the maintenance man to open the property to let them in, as they struggled to get in contact with him. Manny was a relatively large guy. He was 6'3" and he weighed 200 pounds, so he wasn't small. So again, no one is actually safe if he was taken down by Rollins. When the door was open, they didn't have to enter the home, as it was clearly obvious that there was foul play that had gone down. Same MO, blood spatter, yet there was no mutilation that took place, meaning he didn't get a time or he was interrupted. If there was no smell, this would have been a fresh kill. The last crime scene had a smell that the bodies had been sitting out, type of thing, or the temperature was different. But there was a black bag sitting next to her body. But the friend shut the door when the police came back. The bag was gone, meaning they could have caught him and he was still there because the bag was gone. Manny was found in bed where he had put up a fight, but it ended as where it started. It seems that he never managed to get out his bed. And the roommate may have had a shower because she had a towel wrapped around her hip. So they're assuming that she had just come out of a shower, obviously, and was surprised that he was there. These crimes brought back a lot of memories and unwanted ones of Florida's other serial killer, Ted Bundy. He'd been sentenced to death only the year before. Also, the way the knife was used, similar to Jack the Ripper, and for me, I would say the Black Dahlia. Also, the torso of Krista was similar to that as well, because she was cut from her chest down, and again, that happened in a murder here in Scotland as well, Jodie Jones, and again, that was her boyfriend who did that, even though the mother keeps saying he's innocent, he's not. They had evidence placing him as well. They say it was the abuse that led him, Rollins, to do this. He made his crime scenes mirror previous and notorious serial killers of the past. I doubt if he had a good childhood, he wouldn't have. I'm not entirely sure. You do get asked the question, if he wasn't subjected to the abuses in the home, would he still have been a criminal? You don't know that for certain. Ted Bundy didn't have a bad childhood. There's a few serial killers who haven't had bad childhoods, yet they still went along and murdered and massacred a bunch of fucking people. It doesn't matter. I think if it's there, it's there. If it's not, it's not. You can create monsters. You can. It's crazy what your mind can do and what other people can do by manipulation. But I don't believe that it was just his childhood that allowed this to happen. Put it that way. In Scream, Sydney asks, "How do you gut someone?" And Stu explains it, and Billy looks evil as fuck when he does, and he corrects him and he describes it wrong. And then Randy makes a joke about a liver in the mailbox next to her spleen and her pancreas, and that infamous line from Stu, "You better leave her alone." Again, that's when they're talking about how Casey and her boyfriend were actually gutted. And again, Billy's trying to explain him. He says he called tack. You're saying it wrong. After the line of elimination, boyfriends, ex-boyfriends, husbands, people with a beef with the victims had been ruled out. One name kept coming up, and yet how and why his name kept coming up, even though they had no evidence, they couldn't link him to the scene, they had no DNA against him, was Edward Lewis Humphrey. And again, if he was a small-time criminal who had done bad shit, they would have him on record and would be brought in if he had done anything remotely similar. I can imagine, but a bad egg is a bad egg. It must be him without proof, just hearsay. Again, hearsay does not stand up in court, but anyway, these police used hearsay and tried to pin a crime on someone who was innocent in this case. So, had been arrested for stupid things like peeping Tom, like spying through people's windows, like people like harassing them, and people telling him to like fuck off. He would literally peep through the window type thing. So he done like stole from his gran, being aggressive towards family members and things like that. But it was never that he had done this to young women. He'd never stalked people. He'd never killed anyone or done anything like that. But again, the police of that town just wanted to make him the target and suspect number one, basically. So in the apartment block where Manny was living, apparently Edward Humphrey actually had been known to frequent about there because I think someone he knew lived in this like an apartment block on the same street. And apparently they had issues with his behaviour, apparently sleepwalking and flashing. Flashing is not the same as serial killer. So he randomly would show up when he wasn't invited. It doesn't really scream butcher and serial killer, does it? He threw a chair. Oh, okay. So every child is a serial killer who's thrown a chair. In my day, I've even thrown a table. Does that mean I'm a suspect in a killing spree? I think they were running out of time and options and just wanted a suspect at any cost and they didn't give a fuck. The shit was sticking with Edward, put it that way. Edward seemed to be a troubled individual that his grandmother seemed to come to his rescue, and he wasn't very nice to this woman who was helping him. This was another reason people complained about his odd behaviour. From the looks of the man, he looks indeed troubled and he may need some rehab or some counselling or something. There was only one instance a weapon was said to be used, and that was a penknife. When he was asked to leave a home yet no one was killed, he didn't come back and maim them, still slim for the killing. Yet they thought this was a guy. This was the guy. Going by the evidence alone, it's pathetic. They needed someone to blame as the microscope was on them. He was arrested after a police helicopter was hovering over his grandmother's home and again chasing him down and frightening the people who lived there, all on a hunch, wasting money and resources, etc. The police said to the press it wasn't in connection to the murders, but charges on assault to his grandmother were actually why he was arrested, but they were dropped that night by his grandmother. So even though his grandmother, who was supposed to be the victim of the assault, had dropped them, the police still charged him with them. They didn't actually drop the charges, they kept the charges in place because they could keep him in jail. They set his bail for $1 million, again for a first time offender in this. Yes, he committed crimes in the past, but this is technically a first time offender of them saying that he was a murderer. So they set it at $1 million, probably knowing that his family couldn't pay that or get anything to actually bail him out. So they could build a case around him, not find evidence to actually find the killer, just so they could keep him behind bars. As you can imagine, a witch hunt had started and they had someone to attack. Not only Edward, but anyone who knew him, his family. They had no DNA or anything to physically connect him to the crime scenes. The press ran with it, as they do, as a prime suspect, and the police didn't connect him either. So this was the only name that they had that was leaked, even though they had other suspects, which is not suspicious at all. So he was arrested and the police couldn't get a warrant to search his residence for 4 days. With no evidence linking him, no DNA, no matches to get a judge to sign off on that warrant, because this judge should have known that there was nothing linking this man who was arrested on assault charges that his grandmother dropped, yet they reinstated him. It sounds legit that they needed basically to get this warrant somehow. They managed to get the warrant anyway. They had a warrant for his residence, his car, and another address to see if they could pick up any evidence or plant it, no doubt, because they already made their own red flags doing this and harassing this guy who looked so dazed about everything going on around him. I'm not surprised he looked so lost. So the grandmother's house was being ransacked by the police. She arrived home and was in so much distress. An ambulance was called, like I said, harassing an elderly lady who dropped the charges against her grandson, and they still reactivated them to hold him on a technicality that they had created. Makes you trust the police, doesn't it? Still no evidence linking him to any crime scene or victim, yet they still kept him as suspect number one. People started to trust their surroundings as the killer had been caught, or so they were led to believe, because they had a suspect in prison. I wonder how many of them realised that yes, the man was guilty of many things, but there was no evidence that linked him to all this that had happened. This happened to Cotton Weary and Scream. It was only a testimony from Sydney, the victim's daughter, that put him away, as she was so convincing, apparently. And again, Gail Weathers points that out, that she was so convincing that her word put him away. Her word wasn't lies, but it just wasn't Cotton Weary that she saw leaving. It was, in fact, Billy Loomis. So Edward was sent to a hospital, like a prison-like hospital, for 22 months, where convicted killers were sent. He was sent here on the charges of assault that his grandmother said on the stand he did not strike her, yet they charged him and sent him to a facility where actual really messed up prisoners were. He was still considered the only suspect in the murders even after he completed his time in prison for assault that was dropped, but the police still charged him and he went to jail. He got no formal apology, or any for that matter. He was still a suspect even when they arrested the actual killer, so his name and innocence were never officially cleared either. And again, this police department knew there was no evidence or DNA linking this man, yet they did it anyway. So Cotton Weary got all of this. All he wanted was, when his name was cleared and the sequel was for an apology from Sydney, as she was the one who ruined his life for having sex with her mother, who, well, apparently a lot of men in town did have sex with her, and that she was mistaken, thought he was the one that she saw. The sequel also tried to make him the new killer because of, well, payback for sending an innocent man to jail, yet he ended up becoming a victim himself. So they had the real killer in their grasp, but under robbery charges, and was later linked to an address near where Krista was killed. He also had set up a camp near where the first murders had taken place. The police found a tent and some supplies, yet again this wasn't used to help in the investigation. He would have left DNA for sure if these were his belongings. The man he was with was giving him a supply of drugs when the police saw them. Rollins ran, as you do, because you're guilty. Nothing quite says innocence like fugitive on the run now, does it? So the evidence found would have linked him to the murders, but it was the cash with the pink dye on it that brought the attention to the police. It's as if they didn't care they had the evidence of the killer, yet didn't follow up on it. They kept his belongings in storage though. Now he was on the run, no money, no transport. He's stolen someone's key to their car, continued his crime spree of burglary in Tampa. His friend threatened to call the police on him before he left town, and this was the reason he fled, or was it because he thought they were going to pin the murders on him? Who knows? Again, Billy and Stu weren't caught for killing Maureen Prescott, and they thought they could get away with it. Again, as Cotton went to jail, they built an elaborate plot to be attacked by the killer. They had already taken out their peers, etc., and they had been left for dead. They were left for dead. They had cloned phones and things to make it look like Sydney's father, and kidnapped him and left him tied up so they would get away with killing everyone. Yet it didn't work out that way. Now, did it? The end got a little of what they dished out on the town. He was almost caught again, and this happens to Billy. She blamed him as he came through her window looking dodgy as fuck and looking all killer-like, looking around after Sydney was chased down in her own home by the ghost-faced killer who had been stalking her since the killing started, which was it was not a coincidence him showing up, and I think he thought if he showed up then they would rule him out because he was there but he wasn't the killer type thing, but it backfired. He got ballsy and was most likely having withdrawals, a come down, etc., where he tried to rob a busy supermarket on a Saturday afternoon at gunpoint, and a member of staff on her way to work noticed that the store was being robbed, and she called the police, and the manager followed him and gave the police a description and where he was. Then in USA fashion, a police chase was happening and they were in pursuit trying to catch him. When did these things ever work out? The police figured out where he was going and then they caught up to him before he could escape again and he was arrested. On the 11th of September 1990, the Gainesville Ripper headline wasn't on the first page of the newspaper for the first time since the killing. So after he was awaiting trial for his robberies and won at gunpoint, he sat in jail and he sent his mother a Christmas card. And at this point of when he was in jail awaiting trial, he was compliant with the police and didn't cause any unnecessary drama. But he showed the other nasty side of him where he had an angry outburst and in a fit of rage he pulled a toilet from the wall and threw it across the room a bit like a Hulk. Hulk-like, definitely, and well, red flags that this guy something was more than just a thief. So his lawyer wanted a mental health evaluation done and for the guilty plea to be removed from his armed robbery charge. What the actual fuck? You want this guy to be out preying on people all because he had a tantrum. So what led them to believe that they had the wrong suspect and that Edward was innocent of this? Well, when they were looking at similar crimes and similar MOs, like what happened in Gainesville, they came across Rawlings and his attempted murder of his father. There was also a triple homicide in Rawlings' hometown of Shreveport, and the killer washed his victims in a blue/green soap before repositioning the bodies. So this murder in his hometown was overlooked and finally realised that the killings were very similar to the college murders that had happened in Gainesville. The crime scenes were cleaned and so were the victims' bodies, making it difficult to find DNA. All this evidence and findings were available on the FBI database, yet no one actually took a deeper look into these murders that had already taken place in another town. Both killers used forced entry to enter their victims' homes, same knife used to kill and to cut up the bodies, and also same ways in bodies being displayed and positioned after death. This was when investigators realised that they had way too much similarities not to be connected in some way. Rawlings had many charges racking up from different places, so he wasn't going anywhere. They had him in custody already for one for GTA, which is Grand Theft Auto, and the other was for armed robbery. The attempted murder of his father was in Shreveport, and those three people were slain similarly to the students in Gainesville. So again, more evidence and speculation with Rawlings compared to Humphreys, yet they still held him even when his charges were dropped. So a pivotal part in taking down Rawlings was when the FBI task force in charge of the Gainesville killings decided to start from the beginning and search through all the evidence that they had against everything. All the counties where he had committed crimes, they just gathered everything and basically started from scratch, basically, so they would never miss out anything. They could actually put the right killer behind bars. Finally, after neglecting, they had no evidence to charge Humphreys, and his charges were dropped from the original case, yet he was still sent to a prison hospital facility full of intimidating individuals who had actually been convicted of killing people and proven that they had done it. So remember, they kept the belongings from the campsite that were found near Krista, her house where she lived. Well, they tested all the items: a ski mask, bedding, sheets, a cassette tape, a gun, and a screwdriver. So they had 17 matches from the belongings kept by the other police department that matched the evidence collected from the crime scenes in Gainesville. They were apparently very excited by this evidence and found it hard to contain themselves, yet the FBI task force allowed an innocent man to go to jail. Also a twist: there is a pubic hair of Krista's found in the sheets, so they had DNA evidence to prove he was in close contact with her, and this as well a big break in the case that was dodgy from the start. So the dumbass recorded himself to his parents the day before the murders, and he said he was signing off for a bit, but first there was something he had to do first. Was this how they got the idea for the phone calls, I wonder? Because they don't actually use the phone. He never phoned his victims before he actually did it, but he did record something to his parents talking shite about some things and how he was going to do stuff. So was this their version? Was it not their version, but was this how Kevin Williamson came around with the old prank calling? They found bodily fluids at the crime scene that matched with him and also Krista. So when he was in jail already, he was escorted out of his room and the officer stripped his room of everything, including bedding, to test for a positive 100% match. So he had just had a dental extraction the day before, and the prison dentist gave this over, the tooth, so they could check for obviously a complete 100% DNA match, and also hear from a recent haircut. To stop this being thrown out in court, they wanted fresh DNA, so blood and personal belongings they had a warrant for, so they could finally get the true suspect finally. After all DNA was tested, this linked Rawlings to all three Gainesville murder scenes. So after his name was revealed as the true Gainesville Ripper, his name flooded everywhere, and everything was under the watchful eye of everyone, and he became the subject under fire. From his abusive childhood, no excuses for killing innocent victims, but anyways, and everything he had done, all his crimes, etc. Arrested for voyeurism during his marriage, where he had a daughter. Imagine the shit they must have gone through being related to him. These are the people I feel sorry for, the people that literally are related and don't have associations with them, especially even now. Everything he had done from childhood or experiences was out there. It was everywhere. Over 3,000 items of evidence were collected. How many did they collect for Edward Humphreys? That's right, there was fucking nothing. So by the time the Gainesville trial started, he was already serving 4 life terms for the armed robbery and grand theft auto and all the other robberies and crimes he had not been charged and found guilty. He was never getting out anyways, but the families deserved their chance to see the monster that killed their family members for just existing and living their lives, and for Edward Humphrey and his family to get some sort of glimmer of hope that the real monster was behind bars and they could start to rebuild and move on. So Karma has a plan for this man as he tried to unalive himself many times in prison and has yet to be successful. If you cannot do the time, then don't do the crime. Taking yourself out the game because you cannot live with your actions, boo fucking who. At this time, apparently Edward still hadn't been cleared of his name and his charges, etc. And the time he spent in a facility with actual bad people who had maimed and murdered people when they had the guy, this was such a low blow for Edward and his family that they didn't even feel that they had been apologised to for them destroying any sort of life he had, actually, or any life that they could have, and how his poor family were subjected to harassment. Even when he was in prison, they were still being harassed by the media and still being harassed by people in their town. Still, the police department that incorrectly named an innocent man as a serial killer when they knew they had no evidence on him, yet they still kept his name as the #1 suspect. Edward's grandmother ended up having a heart attack due to the harassment and stress that the press put her under. The night she passed away, a reporter came onto her property and banged so hard on her door, demanded she answer his questions. She tried confronting him and she turned pale and then she died there and then of a heart attack. So you can imagine fucking reporters, cunts they are. So 3 days after the grandmother's funeral, the family were told that Rollins had been charged with 3 counts of murder, 3 counts of battery, and 3 counts of armed burglary in Gainesville. And finally, Edward Humphrey's name wasn't used or mentioned in this, and that his name had finally been dropped as a suspect. It took their grandmother dying, who fought for the grandson's innocence. Her life had to be lost for Edward to finally be free from this weight around his neck and the harassment it caused him and his family because the police department failed to do their job. Think of how much this could have been prevented if they did their actual job in the first place. So after the S attempts, he was transferred to a hospital prison facility so he could be under supervision. He spent many of his time writing songs, working out, drawing, writing letters, and his duties in prison, acting like a well-rounded individual. So he began corresponding with the real Gail Weathers, Courtney Cox's character, is exactly the original reporter from the Gainesville Ripper trial. She wrote books and autobiographies of other serial killers and serial criminals, and now she did this. Courtney Cox's character did it in Scream, and it was Cotton Weary. So she went on to have her books used in reference in this to the Stab movies, which was the movie within the movie which started Scream 2. With some embellishments, of course, but left out a love story, shock horror, attention much. The letters were confiscated. The reporter/author had all the copyright for the letters, drawings, and well, everything they corresponded with, including a signed paper about her having the authority to talk about them and the murders and everything that went along with it. Because he wanted that fame, he wanted to be like Ted Bundy. London, the woman's name, that's her last name. I'm not giving her the recognition, but I'll just go with her last name. London, who's the author in question, wanted Rollins to write an explicit detail of the murders and how he murdered the victims, not leaving out any details to the imagination. No, she wanted every last detail. For personal gain, of course. I bet who would want to know all the gruesome details of these victims' last moments on earth? She's a sick puppy. She's just as bad as fucking him. That leaves a weird taste in my mouth. The fact that someone would ask an absolute douche of a guy who did this to actually describe how he was feeling and what he was doing and what was running through his head at the time when he was actually taking these people's lives. She's just as messed up as him. for asking those questions and wanting to know that information. Rollins had become so delulu about this woman that he even burst into song during one of his pre-trial hearings, serenading the court with a song that he wrote for her. If he was trying to go by he was mentally unstable, then that sure as hell would do it. Rollins wasn't liked in prison. What a shocker. And many inmates would volunteer their experiences and interactions with him to the investigative team. So depending on his mood, he would feel penance for his crimes, which I doubt he believed. I really believe. I think he did it more for fucking attention because no one liked him. He's probably looking for a friend. Or he would brag, depending on his mood and how he felt at the time. So again, everything was for attention. Everything has an ulterior motive. He became friends with another inmate called Bobby Lewis, and with this other inmate, he felt a friendship with him would benefit him and his escape. He told him everything and how he knew he had a bedside and also shifted blame to his abusive childhood, his essay he encountered in prison in the 80s, and of course his previous all to blame for his action, took no blame for himself. The man who dished out this violence, what is wrong with these people? They trying to use mental health to romanticise his crimes so the jury would go easy on him. Not that it's not anyone else's fault but his own. And the jury saw right through it, thankfully. Stu and Billy both discussed this type of scenario in the film and how they would get away with it. They would get away with it because they created a story and a murder, array of murders, basically 4 murders, that no one would ever think it was them because they were left for dead. They were stabbed and left for dead. So no one would ever believe that. There was 2 of them. That's the thing. There was 2 killers. One of them could be the killer. No doubt, I think, if they actually, because they never said that they didn't survive. They could have survived, you never know. It's because they were shot in the head doesn't mean that they wouldn't actually come back, as again Randy says in the second one. Bloodier, they're like superhuman strength, they can always come back, and don't ever think that you can take them out the way you did in the first movie, because in the second movie the rules are different. So it's a wee bit similarity there with the real actual case and the movie. In 1993, he called the team and wished to confess. Why a confession? They had DNA evidence that convicted him and the evidence he was there at all murder scenes. So yeah, we didn't need a confession. They had evidence, something they didn't have for Edward Humphreys, and he wasn't given the same treatment. Why give him all that attention? He took 5 people's lives away from this world, their families and their futures, and for what? Because he had a shitty upbringing? So instead of changing his future by not becoming a criminal and a killer, he took out 5 random strangers and wants someone to listen to his crimes? No. In this confession, he refused to answer any other investigators' questions. There's that superiority complex that Ted Bundy had as well, and a few other serial killers have had, that they don't want to speak directly to you. They will only answer the things that they want to answer, and it's also their story and their way. If you answer a question, then they will shut the fuck up and they will not fucking talk. Acting like a petulant child is, again, you're in prison, deal with it, you're not getting out. So they wouldn't talk he didn't want to be spoken directly. They spoke through his friend Luce. So there was that childish behaviour. So they weren't getting the answer they required. Again, Sydney asked both Stu and Billy about their motives and why they did what they did. So what they wanted was to tell her again what they both did. They were so in love with this idea, such a crazy idea, that they would get away with it. It had all been figured out. Apparently, obviously not. Stu seems to start to lose all frames of reality when he asks Sydney, "Did you really call the police?" as he bleeds out. And she says, "You bet your sorry ass I did." Again, he doesn't like this and he unravels more. This is how some inmates have referred to him, as being unhinged and violent, yet he can be quiet and withdrawn all at once. And sometimes a bit cocky, similar to Stu and Billy. They get cocky and they start doing things that are not part of the plan, and that's why they probably would have get caught eventually anyway, because they weren't sticking to the plan. They kind of went off because they obviously liked what they were doing. So the more and more kills they did, the more they obviously started to go a bit off the point of it, basically. So that was when Billy again showed up, and he was there when Ghostface had just left. So I'm not sure if he was Ghostface when he chased her, was he? And it was like Stu was in the Ghostface, and then he just like jumped out, because he looks to see if there's someone there. And everybody thinks, like when you first watch the film, before you actually start picking it apart, that he's looking to see if there is someone there, and maybe Sydney's actually just, seen like some random black figure or some random shadow and maybe thought it was. But no, he looks directly out the door really creepy, like he's looking to see if someone is there. So obviously they used Ooh as the ghost face killer, and obviously it looked like he would get away with it and they wouldn't question him again because they had his dad and a lawyer present to make sure that he goes, I'm not a killer, Sydney, I'm not a killer. He does that in the police station just to try to like, Sydney should have just thought it's him and just be done with it, because again, I already had thought it was, I thought it was Billy, Stu and also Gail for her book, but hey. He called the other side of his personality Gemini. Now, Gemini is incredibly significant because Gemini was actually used as the killer in The Exorcist 3. It was a killer that was going about maiming people, and he was known as the Gemini killer. So him using his personality as Gemini, I think he'd watched far too many movies because it was, again, he was tested under a psych evaluation. It was 50 hours they did, and again, they did come up with some sort of personality disorder, but it was only 50 hours. And the way he says, he describes the murders and stuff, most people with DID, which is the dissociative identity disorder, can't remember what the other personalities do because they're their own person. Yes, they're sharing a body, but they're different people with different personalities, different traits, and they don't ever seem to remember. And this is again portrayed in United States of Tara. It shows you that he wasted a bunch of taxpayers' money by staying in prison instead of just giving them the cheapest way, which I'm sorry I'm going to say is a bullet, by far cheaper, rather than letting him sit in a cell for years and years and years, just costing money. He actually watched The Exorcist 3 apparently the week before the murders. That's where he got the Gemini killer from. And also he watched a movie that again gave him some most likely ideas for his crime spree. The police were a weapon used in this case. He told the investigators, yet it was never found. So while Goose Chase, and then after this confession, his mate was removed from the ward, and Rollins felt betrayed. Is he going to blame Lewis now for this? Most likely. So Rollins befriends another inmate, confides in him again, and instead of verbalizing his confession, he writes it down. Yes, he does. Gives him a copy and says to copy it, and then he's to destroy it, basically. So what he does is he goes to his own his own cell, says to the inmate that he shares a room with, wait 5 minutes, then shout shakedown, and then pretend to flush the letter, the confession, down the toilet, which she doesn't. Why did Rollins feeling like he needed to trust another criminal, for fuck's sake? They lie, they cheat, they steal. He could have been talking to an undercover police officer or informant, for that matter. He is so dumb, isn't he? 3 weeks before the trial, he demanded a meeting with his lawyer to discuss his plea. He wanted to retract his video confession he made to the team and put it in a not guilty plea. And then his lawyer said that they would use his past life of abuse from his father as a way of removing the death penalty. And again, he shouldn't have these rights. His victims didn't get any rights. When you commit crimes such as these, when you are proven to be the killer, if you're not serving the life in a hole, waiting to die, then why should you have all these chances of a different outcome behind bars? When you took another life, you shouldn't have this option. It wastes not only the court's time and the lawyers, but puts back other cases and other people waiting to get justice for crimes against him. He decided he was doing it, and that's it. And his lawyer informed him that not only would this screw up his chances of ever appealing again in the future, that he may not ever have the option not to have the death penalty. This was basically a tactic to waste time and hope he gets life in prison. Again, this has been happening in the Idaho case. A lot of things have been done without prior knowledge to the families and stuff, and prior knowledge to the people involved, just so he can have his spotlight. I will not be naming the killer from that case either, because his name gets mentioned far too much, and that's what he fucking wants. Rollins wanted the crime scene photos not to be used in the trial, and again, why was he advised to wait 3 weeks before trial, then sign a 3-page plea form a week before the trial to plead guilty? Also, this made it official, and he asked if it couldn't be leaked until the day after the jury selection had started for the trial, which was the 15th of February. Only the prosecutor knew he had changed his plea on the day of the trial. This was about to start. It was quiet, not many media or people in the court. Members of the victims' families were present, but none of Rollins' family came to support him. I wonder why. His mother had cancer apparently and was too ill to travel to actually be there for her son. to support him. But that gold digging media author woman, his fiancée Sandra London, was there. The plea caused a shocking silence. Apparently, just because he said he is guilty doesn't mean he regrets what he did. It's fact, he did it, and now he should be behind bars for life, having the nastiest case of diarrhea for life, burning from the inside out, and an inability to stop shitting. Sandra London been in the court as well again. Gail Weathers apparently was in with Cotton Weary through his trial, through his case, through his court case, through his time in prison and everything. So apart from them being engaged, that's the only thing that Gail Weathers was not. But they needed 7 out of 12 jurors to be in an agreement for the death penalty. I am sorry, he said guilty, they have evidence, he bragged about it in prison, he also wrote down a confession, and the investigative team had a videotape recording of that confession that he gave up himself. What more do these people want? They had so much DNA and evidence for him and against him to be put away, and multiple confessions. That's guilty. So Rowlands' lawyers tried again. The crimes were committed under stress and mental health. Does that make it okay to commit a crime such to this magnitude? To make excuses for when it suits you? History of abuse from childhood. Also, the suspect had a history of drug and alcohol abuse, and also the suspect showed remorse. When he admitted it, he didn't say he was sorry. Say he was sorry for what he did. He never did any of this, and his lawyers love to lie in his behalf. I know that's their job, to manipulate. Do you think their conscience lets them sleep at night? Because I hope it fucking doesn't. So Rowlands thought his plea would change the way evidence was used and brought up in court. What, is he fucking special or something? Meaning he could pick and choose what was brought into evidence, but the prosecutor had other plans and showed everything, which made me happy because they didn't have any evidence for Edward Humphreys and he wasn't given any of this special treatment. He wasn't given an option like Rowlands, and the double standards between a guilty killer and the wrong man convicted was disgusting. Absolutely. I just can't believe that again, it still happens to this day. Why is the killer the one with the power when he was the one who took the power from these people is beyond me. So the 3 sets of his DNA found at 3 of the crime scenes where he has obviously subjected them to SA, or it was him getting off, who knows. But this was brought into evidence along with photos from his makeshift campsite right beside Krista's home, or the screwdriver and duct tape, all the things he didn't want brought into it, yet they did. Well done. He thought this would be left out. His DNA, really? And it was part of an active investigation because it was actually held at, again, another county for another murder, for another robbery. Your DNA is on the system. You spent time in fucking prison, so your DNA is going to be on there and the crimes that you have committed. Blood of the only male victim was found on his trousers that they found at the campsite. A handwriting match of a note that was written was found. Inmate confessions, handwritten confession, video confession, the receipt of the K-bar knife used in the crime. In the movie, it was a buck-20 knife, which I've already discussed, which has again been discontinued since. And I'm not sure if it's because of the movie that they removed the production of the knife because the amount of people that wanted them to be like the Ghostface killer. Aesthetically, looks the same, slightly larger in length, but had a similar look about it. The one from Scream is more shiny, I think, and it was probably aesthetically better to use for the killer's character, to be fair, since he was a dark character. He was completely dressed in black with a white ghost face. So the knife, the K-bar knife that was used has a dark blade, so you wouldn't actually see it. So them using a buck-20 knife, which is it's a stainless steel knife, you could see the shadow or see the reflection of the killer in it, which was used as well. And also the reflection of the victims are used in that knife as well from the Scream films. A list of his violent crimes and robberies for the jury. They'd be there all day because they seem to just do a lot of things like that. From the confessions and the bragging stories from inmates, the prosecutor explained in detail what Rawlings discussed at great lengths, that he told the victims what he was going to subject them to before he did it. As they were already in high fear, fight or flight, they were unable to run. He gave them more fear and anxiety of not knowing when or how long they would have to endure all this before he would just kill them. This isn't the mind of a man who is remorseful. This is a man who seems to be trying to perfect his craft if he wasn't caught when he was, how many more do you think would have died at the hand of this evil sadistic prick? Fighting for the death penalty, the prosecutor. His defence used evidence of the 50 hours that mental health spent with him. And again, 50 hours is nothing. I bet a prison officer could tell them a thing or two about him and how he can manipulate and lie about his crimes for attention. So they had the mother on video helping them make the foundation of a mentally unstable man that wasn't accountable for what he was doing because he was an abuse victim with complex mental health needs. How they can all sit there and say all these things in front of the families and the police involved in this case, and not these cases even. The things they saw, the things they had to go through while his family and friends, etc., from his past try and help him escape his punishment. Again, how can they justify making excuses after everything that he did? They used a lot of, please feel sorry for him, he had a bad childhood, yet it seemed his older brother got the brunt of it, not Roland's. Yes, Roland's had an older brother. The way they described it in the past, it was as if he was an only child and he was the only one subjected to it. So yes, this is brought to the attention of the court. He tried to unalive himself as a teen because his father wanted him to go back to school because his grades were slipping when he got a new job. So because he wasn't basically doing well in school, he had to go back to school. So his dad did what most dads did and probably said, you're going back to school, and therefore he tried to commit S because he didn't want to. So again, attention right there. He ended up again slipping, pushed back, then he ended up in jail. As you do, he ended up becoming a bodybuilder in prison, and again, even if he wasn't at the time of the murders, he still would have been willing and capable of doing the things he did to those victims, and the same with ripping the toilet off the wall. Through like muscle memory, he'd still be able to lift through fits of rage. Lots of people can. Women can. Women can lift cars when they're in accidents to save their children, for crying out loud. That your body can do a lot of amazing things, so why they thought that he's this weak guy who can't fucking do anything, wouldn't be able to do these things, is beyond me. So his mother admitted to something was off with her kid. Really? And they started shooting at each other. But his father had been shot in the head. Now, he went to his parents' house and basically started fighting with his dad, and then they ended up shooting. His mum left the fucking room, then she heard a bang, basically, and then nothing. And this is when Rollins had already shot his dad. His dad survived, apparently, but he was, like I said, shot in the head, like the original Scream movie, where they always come back. And it was Stu that came back, and Billy came back, and they get shot in the head. And again, you can be shot in the head and still survive. Again, they just showed you them taking bodies out. You don't know if they actually survived. And again, that's another thing crossing over with the movie as well, using the kind of past of Rollins, like in between murders of not just Gainesville, but the ones that happened in Shreveport, because there was three of my family that was murdered. 3 members of our family was murdered in Shreveport. And obviously his parents, that's where he was actually from. So they didn't even link that up of all that shit happening and then a random shooting happening. So that was weird as well. That was Shreveport's fault. But hey, but they kept these stuff though. That's the thing. They kept evidence, so we can't really fault them for that. He fled again. So his mother, why not have him committed or have him arrested? Why let him flee? Because all this shit could have been prevented, and some of these people, they protected from being robbed or attacked or killed. Yet you're begging 12 jurors to see your faults as a mother, a parent, and a decent human being. We're there to feel sorry for you because you were ill, having cancer, pleading for your son's life in front of the victims' families. By their definition, then, his parents should be in jail, his ex-wife, and anyone he's blamed for how he turned out, as it's their fault he ended up that way. He did, yet that's not what's being discussed. It's whether or not he gets to rot behind bars or have his life taken for being an evil asshole. 3 Shrinks tried to say with his abusive childhood, etc., he had multiple personalities and that he had the mental maturity of a 15-year-old when the abuse started in utero. It seems like with his brother and him, with their father, had the stress of being victim of, say, while pregnant. So again, they haven't taken into account the stress a fetus has when it's grown inside the mother. So if the mother was subjected to all this abuse by their father, physically and emotionally, then the effect of her being pregnant, she would pass that on to each child, which means it never happened when they were born, it was happening in utero. So again, they didn't bring that up. They just brought it up from childhood. But under cross-examination with the defence, basically, prosecutors and defence, when they were actually speaking to him on the stand, it was shown that he didn't have multiple personalities, that he was aware of what he did, he knew what he did, he knew what he'd done was wrong, and that he had planned these murders, so it wasn't another personality doing it, it was all him. All of the time. not anybody else taking over before, during, and after he committed these crimes. It was Rawlings all on his own. So that's what a lot of serial killers seem to do. They always try and blame their childhood. They always try and blame it on someone else, and their lawyers seem to do it as well. They want the jury to fucking feel sorry for them for doing these things. Come on to fuck. If everybody lived that way, then what kind of fucking world would we fucking live in? It took 2 days for the jury to come back. How long would it take you to decide, knowing that that cock had done that? Do you know what I mean? It wouldn't take me 2 fucking days. He'd already be guilty, especially the fact that they put an innocent guy behind bars for this crime. They agreed that Rowland should get the death penalty on all 5 counts. This upset him, apparently. It was up to the judge to have the final say, and then on April the 20th in 1994, he decided to let Rawlings, the families of the victims, and Rawlings to defend their case to him. The judge said he believed that Rawlings was immature, but the evidence that his personality disorder was to blame for his crimes. The judge disagreed that the level of these crimes, that his personality disorder wasn't at the levels they were claiming, and wasn't to blame, basically, for him committing these crimes at all. So he said that he was basically aware, he knew what he was doing, he was of just mind. It was nothing to do with a personality disorder that caused it. It was just him. It wasn't about his past. It was him, basically. He was basically telling you that no, you can have all these things wrong with you, but it wasn't that caused it. It was him, the person, Rollins, that did it. So he knew the difference between right and wrong. At 15, you know the difference between right and wrong. 5-year-old knows the difference between right and fucking wrong, for fuck's sake. The jury and the judge both agreed that his mental health wasn't enough. The aggravated evidence outweighed the mitigating evidence, and that he should be sentenced to death on all 5 counts at Gainesville. Before he was executed, he admitted to the Shreveport triple homicide and pleaded guilty. I think he realised he wasn't getting out of jail, at least, so he may as well own up for the murders he'd actually committed before and elsewhere. Again, giving closure to more families. Again, if he wasn't aware of his actions, then why admit to it? Because the prosecution saw through your shite, that's why. Because he was executed, he did admit through a handwritten letter where he apologised to the families. Again, he couldn't actually apologise to the families' faces. He just wanted to lie on the stand and get everybody else to lie for him. And again, Stu and Billy had that for themselves. They lied for each other, but how long would that last before they would probably sit them both down if they actually survived and say what actually happened? Why did you do it? Why did you come up with this idea? Why did you go after Sydney? Why did you kill all these other people? Well, we know why he killed Casey. Stu went out with her or something, or she turned him down, but then they killed her boyfriend as well. So that was obviously Stu's manhood. That was obviously, he was threatened by it, that she turned him down. They don't know why they killed the headmaster, the head principal. No idea why. Maureen got killed because she was having an affair. Tatum was killed. I think she again was just wrong place, wrong time. I don't know if they wanted to take her out. I don't know why they wanted to take her out. That was Stu's girlfriend. I don't know if Billy killed her. So I know she didn't like Billy, so maybe that was just something petty, you never know. But she again tries to escape through a dog door and ends up with a really infamous death. And there was never any letter of, I did it, I killed these people. But how now? In 2006, he was executed in the prison in Florida, where he pretty much spent the rest of his days, where he was taken out by the lethal injection. And again, that to me is still far too good for him to be killed by lethal injection. But hey, in Scream, both killers were shot. But as I said previously, like Randy said, they always come back. And Billy does, but is taken out. As he said in the sequel, they would come back stronger and harder to kill. They have brought back Matthew Lillard in 2 Scream movies, one recently uncredited and also uncredited in Scream 2. So you never know. That's the thing. They can be brought back. So were you aware that Scream was actually based on a real life case? On a real life murder case. And not just the mind of Kevin Williamson and brought to life by Wes Fkn Craven himself. Not only was this movie inspired by a real event, but the Scream movies and another movie, I think The Purge, actually, after the movies were released, 2 teenagers blamed Scream for them going on not a killing spree, but they killed a mother. One of the killers killed her mum by stabbing her. They wanted to be the real life Ghostface, and it was a 16-year-old guy called Tori Adamek and a 16-year-old Brian Draper. They decided they wanted to basically bring Scream and Stab to real life. So they recorded themselves admitting to their crimes. in 2006 in Idaho, of all places. Idaho already, like I said, I have touched on that case because there's some similarities in how the killer actually acts in this movie, which again, if you follow the Idaho case, you will know that the killer actually was studying this subject and was obsessed with BTK. And again, there's a lot of similarities of some of the things that he'd done at crime scenes and a lot of things that he's done similarly to how he was caught, how he fled, and how he tried to hide from the police and investigators to try and get away with this. But that ran out for him. He is in jail now, awaiting trial. Do you like podcasts like this? Do you love true crime? What other true crime horror movies or movies that have been based around true crime, cold cases, open cases, solved cases would you like us to cover in the future? Please let us know in the comments below. If you like content like this, remember to go check us out in the Confessions from the Darkside social media platforms. We have Twitter, which is X, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Amazon Music, Spotify, and Buzzsprout. Let us know what you think on our social medias and let's get chatting about this topic, all the topics. Let's grow our community and spread how awesome the horror community is. If you want to get to know us as individuals, then you can check out our links below. I am Darcy Darkness and my channel is called Behind the Mash Reviews and I have a YouTube, an Instagram, a Twitch, and a Kick. Luna has a YouTube, a Twitch, and an Instagram, and that is under Luna X Rising. Reach out to us at any point via email, then the channel itself, Confession from the Dark Side at gmail.com. You can catch us there. Or my own, which is Behind the Mash Reviews at gmail.com, and Luna's is Luna X Rising at gmail.com. Confessions from the Dark Side presents The Florida Man in Woodsboro, the story of the Gainesville Ripper, and how Scream was actually based around this tragedy, and how the similarities of the original case and Scream, the movie, how they matched up, and how they created their characters, and how they created the story, Kevin Williamson, and how it was brought to life by Wes Fkn Craven. So, again, like I said, if you like the true crime type stories like this, then let us know in the comments below and you can tell us what story or what case you'd like us to look into next, and we'll look into it and we will see you in the next one. I'm Dust Darkness and this is Confessions from the Dark Side, and I'll see you later.